I rarely wade into the pop cultural stuff on this channel, but there has been so much discussion in the past week on, in just, channels that I follow in general, on the Acolyte, the new terrible Star Wars show, that honestly I want to get my own 2 cents in. And so I would expect, most people that probably sub to this channel are going to skip this one, and that's fine. But I just have to get this off my chest. This is not the worst thing that Star Wars has ever produced. It's far from the worst. Well, maybe not far, but there's a lot of sludge in the Star Wars universe, and I'm not trying to say that Star Wars is trash. I'm not trying to be one of these people and defend it and say, actually, The Acolyte's pretty good compared to, The Empire Strikes Back. Now that's a movie with real plot holes. No, I'm not playing that game. That's stupid. I'm judging The Acolyte for what it is, which is a spin-off TV series. Now, if I judged it based on the budget, I would have to absolutely just demolish it, because for $180 million, this show is trash. $180 million for 8 episodes. What's that, like, is that $20 million a piece? And they're like half-hour episodes, 32 minutes, when you cut out the recap and the credits. Now, granted, I'm recording this the day before Episode 3 is released, and I hear Episode 3 is supposed to be the really worst thing ever. But there's been plenty of discussion about how terrible the first 2 episodes are. And what I will say is that they are not good. They're not good by any means. But not for the reasons that people expected, not for the reasons that I expected. The elephant in the room here, obviously being, and I'm pun 100% intended, the elephant in the room is Leslie Headland, the former assistant to Harvey Weinstein, one of the most hateable people in Hollywood. And so her reputation preceded The Acolyte. And the fact that she was being so publicly flaunted, I guess you could say, by Lucasfilm, which is such an insult to really anyone who has a conscience or a soul, that people were expecting this to be worse proportionately than other terrible Disney Star Wars projects. This one had to be worse. It had worse people involved. It had perhaps one of the worst people in Hollywood who was in charge of creating it, writing much of it, directing much of it. And plus, this woman, I don't know if does she go by woman or is she a they, them? I don't know. She's never made anything of significance in her life. She's directed like 2 episodes of a Netflix show, and she wrote like an autobiographical off-Broadway play about working for Harvey Weinstein. And so I fully expected this to be worse than Ahsoka. And, and that's a high bar, because Ahsoka is quite possibly the worst thing I've ever seen. And I don't say that, just out of hyperbole. It was truly unbearable. Normally you watch something that's terrible, like a B movie, like the kinds of movies that come up on Best of the Worst. Usually you find something that's really terrible, you can at least laugh at it. There's things to sort of pick apart about how it was made. There's a certain charm to how cheap everything is. How you can tell, what the thought process was when they were choosing props or designing sets. Well, the problem with Ahsoka is that it was terrible and had a very high budget, and so it was just hideous. It was 100% fake. Everything behind it was just all volume screen trash, and this very odd fight choreography that was, absolutely, confirmed by Filoni, like, oh yeah, we were trying to make it look like samurais moving very slowly, which is totally inconsistent and breaks any immersion that you may have had up until that point, which, spoiler warning, there's nothing to be immersed in. But anyway, I don't want this to be an Ahsoka review. I don't talk about this stuff on this channel very much, but it's just to say that the bar for being the worst thing that Star Wars has ever produced, and of course this is all during the Disney era, all the worst stuff has been in the last decade, that bar is very, very high or very, very low, depending on how you want to look at it. The Acolyte would have to, go well through the floor. It would have to dig all the way through the floor, down into hell, then back out of hell and pop out in China. That's how low the Acolyte would have to sink to be worse than Ahsoka. And so there's very few little things that the Acolyte could just do right, have any wins in its corner. And it's going to be not the worst thing ever. In fact, the first 2 episodes, I think, are better than not only Ahsoka, they're better than the Book of Boba Fett, and they're better than The Mandalorian Season 3, and they're better than Kenobi. Now, all 4 of those shows that I just mentioned, absolutely terrible, universally regarded as such. Nobody likes them. And so saying that The Acolyte is better than those shows is not even a compliment. It's just a relative acknowledgement, and I think that's fair. And so all of this hype about it being the worst thing ever, I just don't think is accurate on an objective standpoint, just in a pure, I get this isn't film, and, hell, even films don't use film anymore, they use digital cameras, but from a filmmaking perspective, this is better than any of those 4 shows. Kenobi was absolutely hideous. When I said Ahsoka was hideous, I forgot how ugly Kenobi was. Kenobi might have looked worse. Just both of those shows, completely barren, empty, lifeless backgrounds, totally fake. And people have criticized The Acolyte for having some fake-looking backdrops, some volume screen. It's in there. But it's not everything. Certain scenes, believe it or not, are filmed on sets, real sets. And you know what? They're kind of small. You can see where the set ends. You can see, because they can only have so many different camera angles because they can't pull back too far, or else you'll just see that it's a set, and you'll see that there's not really anywhere past what you can see. And that, I have to admit, it's kind of charming, because that's what you would expect of a TV show. It should be making compromises that feature films don't have to make. There are certain restrictions that should exist on a TV show because of its budget. Now, not in the case of this one, because each episode had a budget 80% higher than Godzilla Minus One? What did Godzilla Minus One have for a budget? Was it like 12 million, or maybe less, maybe 10? And that movie was fantastic. It was it was efficient. It was well written, and it looked great. And you know what? In some scenes, it had some small sets too, and they reused sets and they modified sets, and that's great, because that's what you have to do in order to make a great-looking movie for $12 million or less. And so The Acolyte definitely was not using its budget efficiently. But on certain things and the visuals, you could definitely tell that there were people working on it, not named Leslie Headland, who put some real work in. They were trying, and they did some things that were good looking and impressive. I think that the bar in the terrible opening scene of the first episode, that set looks pretty good. It actually looks pretty big. It's got 2 levels to it. It's got an upstairs, and it's all open. It's kind of a cool looking bar. Now, granted, the actual content that they filmed on that set, that scene, was horrendous, and it was an awful way of starting your show. I wouldn't blame anyone who started it, watched that first scene and turned it off, because, if not for morbid curiosity, I would not have watched any of this either. I honestly, after all the hype, this supposedly being the worst Star Wars project in history, I had to see it for my own eyes. Because I wanted to know, could it truly be worse than Kenobi? Could it be worse than Ahsoka? Could it be worse than the Book of Boba Fett? And so before I get into more of the terrible things about it, I feel compelled to point out areas worthy of praise. Because these are things that just didn't exist in those other shows. And so I think a big one for a lot of people would be aliens. There are aliens in this. There are alien creatures, a lot of whom look pretty good. The CGI is not awful. They don't look like... they don't have that Oddworld look to them. Kind of like the prequel aliens, that the CGI aliens in the prequels all looked like they could be characters or creatures out of an Oddworld game. I don't know if you folks have ever played that. Abe's Odyssey back in the day. It was like on the PS1 and PC. I played it on PC. And it had all these sort of like cartoony CGI characters. They were kind of gross and grimy. They were things that kind of looked like Dexter Jetster. Or some of the pod racers in the Phantom Menace. The goofy aliens. The Acolyte had alien designs that looked decently gritty, and they were pretty high fidelity. They were definitely high poly models. At least the ones that were up close. I'm sure if you looked at aliens like in the background, you're going to see some low poly stuff, some less detailed models. And of course, yes, I would prefer if they were all wearing costumes. The Nemoidians in the Phantom Menace, I think, look really, really cool because they are real costumes. And there are Nemoidians in this, which I was happy to see, because we haven't seen them since, I think since Newt Gunray got murdered by Darth Vader. I think that was the last time we ever saw a Nemoidian. Anyway, they look pretty cool. And yes, these were CG, but they look good. It's not like they took the Clone Wars model of a Nemoidian and just slapped it on the screen. And you've got this blocky, like claymation-looking alien thing on screen. It worked. And so I was glad to see how many different, the percentage of, believe it or not, I'm going to praise the Acolyte for its diversity. The irony. It was diverse in the sense that there were a bunch of aliens, cool things that I'd never seen before. They weren't just the same reused designs, and it wasn't just all people. And I absolutely loved Andor. I'm an Andor snob, and there's nothing really wrong with this, but something that Andor did not have, it was pretty glaring, were aliens. It was everybody's a human in Andor. And if this is supposed to be some, great space adventure series where people are far-flung across the galaxy, and we know that there's other intelligent life on all these different planets. You have different species that can all communicate and things. It's kind of strange when you just go a long time and all the characters, and well, not even characters, just the people that you see around, if they're all human. And so that's something worth praising that a lot of other things just don't do right, or don't do as much of. And then the last thing that I think is worth praising is like some of the music, which I believe the guy who did the score for this also did like Game of Thrones, was it? Yeah, you know what? It's one of those shows. He did something impressive before this, and so that was to be expected. And so again, these are just I'm trying to give it as many points as possible, before we tear it down, because you don't want to exaggerate. And I don't want to, I try and, when you're judging bad media, you have to give, if you give it as much credit as possible, it makes the fatal criticisms, the fatal flaws, that much more apparent. I'm just trying to give the thing a fair shot, not kick it while it's down. And so that brings us to the big flaw, the actual elephant in the room. The writing, which ranges from bland and serviceable to butt stupid. And so my initial impression upon watching these first 2 episodes and having some time to think on it is I got Leslie Headland only wrote one of the 2 episodes, and so I don't know who's more to blame for this, her or the writers of the episode 2, but they both kind of felt the same to me in terms of how the dialogue and the storytelling worked. It felt very amateurish. I definitely got the impression that, like, hey, this is someone's first show that they've never made anything before, and they're trying to play it safe. Which is not something I expected. That is not the criticism that I expected to levy at this show. Now, maybe episode 3 is going to totally subvert my expectations. Maybe that's what she was doing. She was trying to make it seem so conventional and normal in order to lull the audience. Maybe she's going to try and make some big, ooh, I'm such a big brain move in episode 3 and beyond, and it's going to be a completely different show. But I haven't seen anything past episode 2. So the first 2 episodes are a totally bland and conventional police procedural. And it's not a good police procedural. It's a very generic and trite police procedural. And that, to me, should be the main criticism of the writing. There's nothing interesting about it. It's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not offensive, it's not even so far, except for the, I know this is going to play a big role later, but so far in the first 2 episodes, the only super woke thing was the 2 mothers, which, it's eye roll worthy, and of course it's going to break the immersion because it's so obvious. It's like, oh yes, we're in 2024, so our protagonist, who is a woman of color, has 2 mothers. And that part, yes, is very boring. It's very typical of the current year. But then the rest of it, that's not current year stuff, is just typical bland TV stuff. It's TV tropes. It's the, oh, I didn't commit the murder, it was my evil twin. It's, what are you doing here? I'm here to kill you, as they hold a knife to her throat. It's the most... The dialogue is... Somebody said AI generated. It's not even AI generated. It's... Because an AI would try to think, okay, how would people say this? Let me try and, look at my references for language, at how humans speak, and let me try and mimic human speech pattern. AI, in other words, would have done a better job with the dialogue. What the dialogue in the show is, the writer's saying, okay, here's what I need each character to convey in X scene. I'm going to have the characters say what I need them to convey. Oh, hello, Master Saul. You are my good friend, and because you are my good friend, I come to tell you that the murder of your other good friend, who I know you were very close to, we have a suspect, and then Master Soul says, yes, I was sad to learn of my good friend's death. And then another example. Great, this is just great, very touching scene. Please believe me. I believe you. And then I think the most glaring one, it was something to the effect of, if it becomes public knowledge that a former Jedi is a suspect in the murder of a Jedi, and then the other guy finishes the sentence and says, our political opponents could use that against us. It's like, a normal person would not talk that way. That is how you describe something when you're trying to write out lore. This very clinical language. You wouldn't say our political enemies could use this against us. You would say, whoever your political enemy is going to try and use that to make us look like we're incompetent. That's how you would say that. That would be the more immediate concern. But it's so shallow. It's like, I get it. Okay. If you said who the political enemy was, we might not understand that they're the political enemy of the Jedi, and so we have to say that they're the political enemies, so that the audience understands, why that matters and who he's talking about. But at the same time, then you know for a fact, the writer doesn't actually know who would be using that against them, or why that would be useful. There's nothing left up to the imagination. There is nothing to try and suss out of this dialogue, and so it's by no means good. But in the fact that it's very straightforward, and every scene we just sort of get told what we need to know for the plot to move forward, it is better than Ahsoka's dialogue by a long shot. They didn't need to pad out the runtime with long pauses between each character speaking, saying bland lines of dialogue. They just let the characters, spill out their bland lines of dialogue. And honestly, there are two actors in this who I think are pretty decent. It's the Killmonger guy, with the haircut from Black Panther. The one who thinks that Anakin blew up the Death Star. That guy, believe it or not, can actually act. He has some charisma. And then the Squid Game guy. The Squid Game guy seems like an actual actor who happened to stumble upon the set of a Star Wars show for some reason. I don't know how he ended up there. It probably won't be good for his reputation. But nevertheless, he is there and tries to act to the extent that the script will permit him. And so I don't want to go on about this all day. I want to wrap this up fairly quickly. The problem with the first two episodes, that's all I'm talking about here. Episodes 3 through 8 could be a completely different story. The problem is these are not offensive. They're not, these episodes. It's not like it's crime. It's not like it's insulting to the viewers. Well, it might be insulting to your intelligence, but it's not literally like pointing at the viewers and saying you're bad people and everything you like is a lie. They're not doing that yet. This is very bland. It's boring. It's overdone. It's cliched. And that's the opposite of what I expected. And I would not recommend any of these shows. None of them are good. But I will take bland and cliche over whatever the hell Ahsoka is any day. The one big red flag that I see coming is that they're trying to make this into some broader, galactic conflict stuff, which is stupid. All the stuff with the Sith seems very, very silly. I don't look forward to that. But if they wanted to just make a show where the Jedi are cops investigating murders, that would be boring. It would be uncreative, but it would probably be the second best Star Wars show that Disney's ever made. Because that's how low the bar is set. Like, honestly, I think playing it safe with this kind of stuff is the best thing that they could do. Andor's great, but that's a miracle that show happened. I don't know how anything of decent quality made it through the Disney studio system. But that one did. Let's hope that season 2 ends it on a high note, and it all comes together in the end. And as far as this show is concerned, it is absolutely a failure. It is not going to bring in new voters. It's not going to bring in new viewers or subscribers to Disney Plus. They're not going to make their money back off of this. They're not even going to break even. I don't think that this show will be even able to retain people who have clung on this long to Disney Plus, for the sake of Star Wars or whatever. And people who are not there to watch Star Wars on Disney Plus anyway, they wouldn't be affected by this. When you're running a service like this, and when you bundle these Star Wars shows with the rest of Disney Plus or whatever, Disney understands, like, okay, certain people are there to watch Bluey. That's probably 95% of Disney Plus subscribers. Another percentage are there to watch old Disney movies that haven't been edited into oblivion and censored. However many few of those, are left. Disney is a big fan of trying to butcher its own catalog. So you've got those two groups of people, and then 1% of Disney Plus are people who are there because they want to watch Star Wars. And so I don't think that the Acolyte will entice people who are on the fence about canceling Disney Plus. Will not entice them to stay. And it will not bring in any new people because it's not a remarkable show. Like, even if you are, they've been trying to sell this and release it during Pride Month and, like, market it as the gay Star Wars. They're doing that explicitly. They're calling this gay Star Wars. I'm sorry, I don't know what there is to, if you're a raging homosexual and what you look for in entertainment is just homosexuality and sexual degeneracy and all sorts of, I don't know, whatever weird fetish stuff. I don't think the Acolyte's going to scratch that itch. I just don't see it. It's a generic cop show. And you can watch that for free. You can watch generic cop shows all day you want for free on USA or, any number of cable channels or local channels. In my case, I mean, there's a whole station that just runs like NCIS and Criminal Minds all day, every day, reruns, and that's a free over-the-air channel I can pick up with an antenna. I'd have a lot more fun watching that than the Acolyte. And so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get this uploaded before it is rendered obsolete as a review by, at midnight when Disney puts out episode 3 and, manages to make me look stupid for everything I've said here. But that's why I wanted to get it out. I wanted to get my distilled impression of the first 2 episodes so that I could, for myself, perhaps in a few years, look back and say, because the opinion, once they see the rest of the series, might be completely different. But this is definitely what they're setting up. And so if they go and completely do a 180, it'll just be an attempt at a cheap, boring subversion. And I guarantee you, whatever subversion they're going for of our expectations, it's going to be less interesting than the boring, generic police procedural drama. So with that said, I will see you folks back here tomorrow.